Welcome to the Leadership Window podcast with Dr. Patrick Jinks. Each week through a social sector lens, Patrick interviews leaders and experts and puts us in touch with trends and tips for leading effectively. Patrick is an LSI certified leadership coach, a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, a best-selling author, award-winning photographer, and a professional speaker. And now, here's Dr. Patrick Jinks.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 88 of the Leadership Window podcast. Can't believe we're into 88 episodes already. Tricia, you've been on one of them. This is your second time around. That means you're special. Folks, I can't tell you how excited I have been about this particular episode today. We're going to get right into it because I got a feeling that if we don't, we'll never finish. And I want to be respectful of my guests' time and of your time and get right to it. I have in the studio today, I just mentioned Tricia. Tricia Richardson is the president and CEO of SC Thrive. That's a nonprofit, a statewide nonprofit here in South Carolina. She's been on the show before. I don't remember which episode, but go back and look her up. You were in here with Lila Anna Sauls with Homeless No More, and was it Andrea Smith from Senior Action in Greenville, and we were talking a lot about capital campaigning, I think, and how to lead a nonprofit into buying new buildings and fancy stuff and all that. But we had a really great conversation about the leadership nuances that it takes to do that. And I've been working with Tricia now for a number of years, working with her organization. It's a super honor to get to coach her and her leaders and be at their annual trainings. And so look them up at scthrive.org. And I'm not going to go much more into Tricia's bio. You can go back and listen to her previous episode. We are going to focus today on Tricia's father, Colonel William Collier. The colonel is U.S. Army retired, served 30 years as an artillery officer. His assignments included tours in Korea and Germany, 2 combat tours in Vietnam, and various stateside assignments, including staff and command duties with the 1st Cavalry Division, the 1st Infantry Division that he calls Big Red 1. I'll learn a little bit about where that name comes from in a moment, and the Army General Staff at the Pentagon. Now, I really want you to hear this part. In addition to the Field Artillery Officers Basic and Advanced courses, Colonel Collier is a graduate of the Armed Forces Staff College and the Army War College. He received the Silver Star, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, 4 Meritorious Service Medals, the Air Medal, 2 Army Commendation Medals, the Vietnam Gallantry Cross with Gold Star, the Vietnam Armed Forces Honor Medal First Class, the Combat Infantryman Badge, the Army Staff Identification Badge, and numerous other service medals and ribbons. And there's one more big one that those that know him think ought to be on the way, but we could talk about that a little bit later too. The point is, this is a decorated war veteran that we're talking to, and just an extraordinary gentleman, as I'm learning, having had a conversation with him and know him a little bit through, of course, the descriptions of him through his daughter. But following military retirement, he was then employed in the South Carolina state government for 11 years, retired from the State Transport Police, where he was the program manager. Colonel Collier received his BA degree from the University of Richmond in Virginia. Go Spiders. I'm a Spider as well. We have that in common. And his master's degree from Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania. Tricia, I will start by thanking you for introducing me to the Colonel and your father, and just a great man, and for all the work that you're doing. Thanks for being here with us.
Absolutely.
And Colonel, I could spend an hour and a half thanking you for all that you've done for the country, for your family, for the world, even post-military retirement, and all the things that you've continued to do. I really want to thank you for carving out time for us today and coming over here to the studio to record this with us and tell your story. It's just absolutely extraordinary. So thank you both for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
It is fantastic. The book, by the way, is Outnumbered 20 to 1. This is authored by Colonel Bill Collier. And yep, outnumbered 20-1. I took me about 2 days to read it, and that was because I had a lot of other stuff that I had to do. I could not put it down. It's absolutely extraordinary. I was sitting there the whole time going, this needs to be a movie. This needs to be a movie. It reads like a movie, and yet it is it's a documentary and a biography. There's no fiction in here. This is a real life experience, and the outnumbered 20-1 refers to a specific battle. I think you said in the book it's one of, if not the last major battle that took place in the Vietnam War, and it's the battle at Mo Duc. And I'm gonna, Colonel, I've got a number of questions to ask you. We're gonna focus certainly on the battle because that's really the crux of the book. But I'd like to just start a little bit by asking you. Boy, there's so many things into your personhood that we can go into. I think for time's sake, we'll jump straight into the military aspect. When you were at University of Richmond, you joined the ROTC, and then you joined the Army. What was the decision? Why join the Army at that point in time?
Well, the draft was alive and well at that time, so my number was pretty close to the top. And so instead of trying to dodge that, when I went off to college, I was going to sign up for Naval ROTC because I come from a Navy town. They had stopped. That was the first year they weren't offering it anymore. So I tried the Air Force. Well, same thing with them. The only thing left was the Army. So I signed up for the Army. I figured better to go in as an officer than with $220 a month pay than enlisted in those days at $88 a month.
It sure seems like a good and sensible choice today, listening to it put that way. And you joined on your own terms then, rather than wait to be drafted, which I guess you kind of were saying you sort of saw the writing on the wall, but you went ahead and joined yourself and took that. You had the maturity enough and the wisdom enough to say, if I'm going to do this, let's go in as an officer and let's do ROTC and prepare myself in advance. Preparation is one of the things that I wanted to talk with you a little bit about, because you talk about your training as an artillery officer. And I want to say maybe 2.5 years of training, or at least one portion of it. And what struck me about it is as you're going through the battle and your other military battle experience, the training is obviously what prepared you for that. And you talked a lot about being prepared for that and how that training really did set you up and prepare you. Talk a little bit about preparation, because it seems to me today, we were talking a little bit about generations a little while ago over lunch. It seems to me, this is going to sound terrible because I don't want to judge an entire generation, but every generation has a perception of the one that follows them. And I see a lot in my coaching world and my business world. I see a lot of people who want they want to get moved up quickly. In 90 days, a lot of young people are like, I haven't gotten a raise. I haven't gotten a promotion. In a year, they want to be the vice president. And it's like, there's this thing called paying your dues, and there's the training and preparation that comes from it. Talk about, you started that early with the ROTC, but how important the training and the preparation was for all that you went through because you lived it.
I think my generation was the first ones to sort of leave home and not come back to where they were born and raised and went to school. So many of us didn't. I had no idea what I was getting into when I went to college. One motivation was that I would go to ROTC, but that bothered me a little bit because I knew I was close to top of being drafted. If I quit college, that was a motivation to stay in. Because otherwise I knew I'd probably be drafted. I think my generation learned, we grew up in college, or if they went into the military at the age of 18. I watched later on a lot of guys come in about that time. Those were the two major places to go, unless you just hung around home and got a job best you could. I wanted to see more of the world. Once I got to college, I learned there's a world out there. That I went off to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I didn't choose the artillery. The Army chose it for me. But it was a new world, and it was very interesting, meeting people from all over, learning a trade. I'd always been a hunter with my dad and boys in the neighborhood, and I was good with a 12 gauge and a 410 and what have you. But these bullets were big, and they were heavy. But it was a new experience, and we were trained by professionals. I mean, the people that trained me had been through World War II and Korea. They knew so much. They were so comfortable in what they were doing. And every time I looked at something, it was brand new. It was the first time I'd seen it or heard it or touched it or whatever. And they just were super trainers. As I said in my book, probably the best thing could have happened to me was go there for my, after basic was my first tour in the Army.
I've worked with some companies and done employee surveys and tried to figure out what employees think about their workplace. And I've been to a number of companies whose employees complain a good bit about the lack of training they get. And so they're like, we come to work here and they just throw us into our jobs as welders or as, candlestick makers or whatever it is. And there's no real formal training program. And it seems like, I don't know if this is true, but it seems like a lot of companies or corporations have reduced it seems like it used to be a lot of formal training. When you go to work for a company, you had to kind of go through a whole program before you could get out on the floor or on the phone or whatever your job was. Not so in the military. You're not going to go out there without being thoroughly trained. And the fact that you said that your trainers were so excellent, I guess when you go there and you're just in such awe and wonderment about not knowing anything, you got to put a high degree of trust in those people that are training you that, well, they know what they're doing. So I'm in good hands.
Looking back at it, it's really interesting. Here comes a brand new 22, 23-year-old male with a gold bar on him, second lieutenant, who doesn't even know anything about the military. Not even sure when to salute and when not to salute. I mean, I didn't go to a military academy or had no previous military training, so everything was from scratch, so to speak. I was the boss, a supervisor of these guys. There were 5 lieutenants, or 4 lieutenants in the unit. Is that right? 3, 4? Yeah, 4 lieutenants and a captain in that first battery. And everybody had some sort of experience. And, of course, I was the junior one when I walked in, so I was the newest guy. I was the greenest guy. And they could pull pranks on me for a while there and get away with it. Until I learned how to do it, then it was my turn to pull pranks on the next lieutenant that came in. But nonetheless, we got training all the time. You talk about the training in the military, it gives you, every grade gets trained to go to the next grade, basically, or the next 2 grades. The NCO grades, the NCO ranks are the same way, and the officer ranks are the same way. So at every level, you're just not going to get trained as an artilleryman and forget it. You've got to learn at every level. Every job requires some more training of some sort.
Oh, that is really good. Tricia, I can actually see the look on your face. You know exactly where I'm going on this one. We are constantly, I am constantly coaching leaders about focusing on also what's next, or preparing for what's next. You focus on now and your job that you have now, but you've always got to prepare for what's next and what's that next level. And I'm always encouraging leaders to start training for the next job before they get the next job. I mean, you're never completely ready for it until you've done it, but that's an aspect. You just shared an aspect I hadn't really thought of. You're always training. Their whole intention is to move you to the next level. The idea is not to train you so that that's where you stay.
But one leadership thing I just want to share, because he was talking about the story of just coming in brand new, and he taught this to me too, was that when he went in there, he took assessment and he said, okay, I don't know anything, so let me go to the person who does. And was it the sergeant major, that you sat down and he said, you listen to me, buddy, and I'll take you where you want to go?
That was Chief Firefighter.
All right. And
so Jordan.
Tell that story, because I think that's imperative to the fact that he listened to, he stepped back. He didn't walk in knowing it all. He said, let me learn, let me grow, let me find the right people who know the right information to take me to make sure that I'm successful.
Well, Sergeant Jordan is at the beginning of my book. Excuse me. He probably made me the artillery officer that I finally became. It wasn't easy for him. training me. But I describe it in great detail in the book. But essentially, I arrived in the unit, parked my car, cocky little second lieutenant, all dressed up good. My shoes were shined. I had a haircut. I looked the part very well. I was so happy to get my first unit assignment. I thought I was a big deal. As I opened the door, this hand grabbed me on the left, right here between the elbow and the shoulder. He didn't salute me. He didn't say, sir, nothing. He said, follow me. I couldn't follow him. He had me. He drugged me, basically. And on the way to the orderly room, he told me that he's my sergeant. I'm his lieutenant. And if I will shut up, pay attention to what he tells me, I will make him he will make me a decent artillery officer.
Wow.
Now, I'm thinking, he should have saluted me. How am I going to address him for not doing that? Well, it wasn't too far to the orderly room there. About the time we got there, I was still pondering what to do. Then we walked, he opens the door, and the first sergeant yells, come in, Lieutenant. Oh, my gosh. So I went in there, and everybody yells around there. And the first sergeant said, Lieutenant's here. And the battery commander yells, get in here, Lieutenant. Everybody yells around there, you know. No saluting, no sirring, no nothing. But anyways, I describe that in the book. But later on, Sergeant Jordan in the field would show me artillery techniques and tactics from how to put a unit to perimeter defense, which saved our lives in Vietnam, by the way. And because I learned from him, and it prevented us from being overrun my second tour a couple times.
Wow.
And he taught me how to shoot different types of artillery by laying the batteries for direction, which is laying all the tubes parallel and being sure they're accurately laid. You know, there are various ways to do that. I'll describe those in the book. But then he would watch me. The XO would often lay the battery, which is what we call lay the battery for direction. And then the safety officer had to go over and double check it. So, and I was a junior officer, I had to be the safety officer. I'd go over and double check it. I could not use the same method that the executive officer had used. And he would watch it. He would go screw with an aiming circle or give different data for the end of the OL, orienting line, or something like that. Terms that y'all probably don't understand, but just know he was messing with me to see if I double checked. And at first I wasn't quite as doing what I should, but after a few times.
These are people you outrank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was Sergeant Jordan was E7.
Yeah, yeah.
He was a World War II and Korean War veteran, about 5'9", if he stood straight, but he didn't know how to do that. He still had some metal fragments in his cheek right up here, some in his back. Several Purple Hearts. I describe him quite accurately. At first, I was scared to death of him, and after a while, he really taught me. And then after a while, I realized I loved that man. You know,
I'm loving this story because we talk about a principle a lot we call leading up. And who's going to get in the leader's face? And who's going to tell the leader, look, you might have a rank, but I have some knowledge, and you're going to need this knowledge. And so if you want to succeed in your higher level, listen to what I'm talking about. And sometimes as leaders, we can be too arrogant to listen to the people under us. I always wanted, when I was in organizational leadership, I always wanted people, and this wasn't hard to get, I always wanted people that were smarter than me, that could do their jobs better than I could do their jobs as their leader. That's what I wanted. And I wanted people who would look at me and say, you're not thinking about this right. I understand what you want to do, but this isn't right. You need to listen to me. I really did appreciate it. You did describe that really well in the book. Tell us, let's get to the battle. By the way, you served a tour in Vietnam that was very different than your second tour. You came back, you survived it, all is good. They tell you, hey, you know what? You've done your duty. You're going to Germany, you and your family. No more short tours for you. You've done everything we need you to do. And I'd like for you to just tell that story really quickly, because it could have been that you never were at Mo Duc. It could have been that you never went back to Vietnam. That was the plan, and that was even what you were told by the Army, and it didn't work out that way.
My first tour overseas, unaccompanied, we call it in the military, that's without family, was in 1963-64 to Korea. My second tour was in 66, 67 to Vietnam. And I got orders to Germany in 70. I came out of Vietnam and into the artillery school for 3 years. And then I started hearing people going back to Vietnam for a second tour. So I got orders to Germany. So I called the personnel center called Milpersen in Alexandria, Virginia. And it said, if you're going to send me back to Vietnam, just send me now, and then when I come back, I go to Germany for the 3 years, which I was told that's a great tour, and it was. I did go 2 tours over there, but this was before the first one. They told me there's no way I'm going back. I'd served my two short tours with us without family. I'm good to go. Go to Germany, enjoy your 3 years over there. Well, in a year and a half, I had orders to Vietnam. And I don't know if I ought to tell this story or not, but I called Perscom in Germany. Milpersen was over in Germany, was called Personnel Center, Perscom. I called up there when I found out I had orders, and I explained that I'd been told I would not be going back to Vietnam or any other short tour for a third time. I'd had 3 years over here. And the guy sort of flippantly said, I don't care. You're going back to Vietnam. So I explained it again a little more forcefully, and maybe embarrassingly so. And when I finished my tirade, he said, "You're still going. I don't care." So I went. Many years later, I came out on the advance on the promotion board for command, battalion command, and I ended up in Fort Riley, Kansas, in the Big Red 1, 1st Infantry Division. As I walked to command an 8-inch long tube nuclear unit. So I walked in to meet my boss. My new boss, the already commanded, seemed like a pleasant guy sitting behind a desk. And after about 5 minutes of talking, he said, "Does my voice sound familiar?" "Oh, really?" He said something, and I said, "Oh, my goodness." And he said, "Yeah, we had a conversation in Germany in 1971. And I thought, well, I'm done. My goose is cooked. But he said he liked it. We'd probably get along, and we did.
He respected it, the straight talk and the stand-up, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. We did have a few disagreements. So during the time I had the command for a little over 2 years.
Yeah.
Usually keep them for about 18 months, but I had him on for 2 years. And
so you go your second tour, and tell us what was the assignment there at Mo? What was Mo Duc? You described the difference between sort of like we have towns and neighborhoods, and they had was it Hamlet? Is that what it was?
Well,
Mo Duc?
You have provinces, which are sort of like states,
right?
And then you have districts, which are sort of like counties.
Okay.
And then you have villages, which are like subdivisions.
Okay.
Then you have hamlets, which are smaller than a subdivision.
Okay.
And but I was assigned as MACV, Military Advisory Command, Vietnam, Team 17, to Quang Ngai Province, the district of Mo Duc. So.
Okay.
Had a 4-man team. Actually, had an 8-man team. There were 4 Americans and 4 Vietnamese. And
I hadn't thought about that a lot. You're working with the South Vietnamese. The Americans that are over there are actually supporting them.
Yes.
And so your command was joint between South Vietnamese and Americans, who of course were fighting the North Vietnamese.
In 1972, all the American combat troops, or maybe there were 1 or 2 here or there, but they were gone. I didn't quite realize that when we landed in June of 1972. By August, there were no American combat troops other than advisory teams and a few special forces teams and things like that, support people. Embassy guard, Marines were guarding the embassies and so forth. So there weren't any big, I was with the 1st Air Cav the first time. It was at Fort Hood, Texas. They're gone. My battalion that I was in the first tour, they had been deactivated and were no more. There were no combat units over there.
Okay.
I was strictly up advising. We were advising, and of course the Paris peace talks were going on at that time.
Right.
So we were told to keep it low key, just do what we're supposed to do, advise them, help them, assist them, go out on operations with them, but don't stir up any trouble. I had the call signs and so forth to get air, tactical air if I needed it, and some Navy support from the South China Sea if needed.
So you're not expecting major battle here. You're there in advisory capacity. It's a second tour. The war's winding down. There's not a lot of American combat over there. You're working with the South Vietnamese. Are you thinking at this point, this isn't going to be a really big deal? I'll do this and go home.
From June until September, we called it walks in the sun. We'd go out on an operation, and it really wouldn't amount to much. Every once in a while, we shoot up a little bit or ran into an ambush once or twice, but I mean, really nothing.
I love how casually you say that. We ran into an ambush every once in a while. A little shooting here and there, but no big deal.
Well, I don't think the Viet Cong wanted to ambush any more than we did. So, they initiated it, and we'd DD Mao. That means we'd get out of there.
So you got walks in the sun, and then something changes pretty suddenly. Tell us what happened at Mo Duc.
Well, in the spring of 1972, in Tet 68, in my opinion, the war was over. The American forces and armed forces, ARVN for the South Vietnamese forces, had basically completely defeated the North Vietnamese Army and the South Vietnamese communists. They rebuilt their forces from 1968 to 1972. And they came across in a spring offensive in 1972. I don't have a detail in front of me, but approximately 14 divisions came down that didn't exist after 1968, but they put together at least 14 divisions and some down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, spinning off a couple of them here and there all the way down to the south part of South Vietnam, the Delta area. They put the 3rd Division west of Quang Ngai Province. No, the 2nd Division, NVA Division, west of Quang Ngai Province. The 3rd NVA Division west of Binh Dinh Province, which is where I was my initial tour. So I knew both of those areas.
And again, NVA is North Vietnamese Army.
North Vietnamese Army. Mm-hmm. And we started getting reports that they were moving eastward. But my district chief was dismissed it, so I've accepted that. As I've checked it out, there's nothing to it. I kept reporting it up, the chain, but my district chief didn't report it up. We had parallel communication chains. He didn't report his up. So finally it came down that while we're getting this information from some major there and the American channel, and the Vietnamese are saying, no, they're false. That's nothing to do.
The district chief was Vietnamese. This was Colonel Tan, was it? Okay.
Yeah, he was Lieutenant Colonel in the ARVN Army.
Okay.
South Vietnamese.
So you essentially, now did you report to him essentially? I mean, were you in his command or was he in yours?
No, we were in the Military Advisory Command, which is all American, but we were assigned to advise and assist the ARVN South Vietnamese at the district and province level. And my Team 17 was, Team 17 was also at the province level. It was Quang Ngai. Team 17 was for Quang Ngai. Each district had an advisory team, and the province headquarters had a province advisory team.
Got it. So you're getting reports that there's some activity going on that may put you in danger. Where are these reports coming from? The villagers or?
I had made a pretty good connection with the Arvin S3, the District S3, District Operations Officer.
Okay.
He and I got along pretty well, and he was telling me this. And so now they're coming down, and finally my boss says, you got to be careful what you're reporting, because the guy you're advising is not reporting. He says he's looked into it. There's nothing to the reports. So I would talk to Captain Gwynn, who is the operations officer who works for Colonel Ton, and he says, I'm getting it from my people who are out in the field, and they're pretty reliable. They've never let me down before. And they say that the North Vietnamese are encroaching in the western districts, and they're coming into Mo Duc pretty close, and that they're getting ready for an attack. So I kept sending it up. Well, lo and behold, on September 15th, a helicopter arrives, and an American general officer gets off the plane. Oh, nice. And typhoon was just moving in.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know he was coming. But I went up and reported to him. Well, he was not very friendly at all. And he just said, tell me why you're reporting this. I told him. And he didn't want to talk to the district chief. He didn't want to talk to the district operations officer. He just simply said, I'm told there's nothing to it. You are just getting too nervous out here. We're going to send you to Vung Tau, which is a place they used to send the Americans to rest and recuperate for a couple of days after some big battles, you know. That embarrassed me. It was, you know, but I didn't know what was true and what wasn't at that point. You know, your generals, you know, you believe what they say. You think they know everything. They should. They're supposed to. They're supposed to have better lines of communication and such. Anyway, I invited him to stay. I mean, who would want to stay with things that are starting to flood? We didn't have any smart accommodations he was used to, pleasant accommodations like he was accustomed to. So he got on his helicopter about 5 o'clock and left. He turned down my kind invitation to stay and enjoy some Vietnamese food and so forth. 5 o'clock the next morning, we got attacked. It was a 54-hour battle over 3 days.
All right, I'm going to pause here. I want to make sure I recap this. Tell me I got this right. You're there. You're advising the South Vietnamese. Lieutenant Colonel Ton is the district chief that you're advising. All is well. You're starting to get these reports, and Captain Nguyen, who did report to Lieutenant Colonel Ton, is saying, we're getting I trust these people I'm getting these reports from. There's some activity. They could be moving into Mo Duc, and we could be in danger here. You're hearing it and going, well, then we should, prepare for this. Your general is telling you, you don't know what, you're being too nervous. You need to go on vacation. The district chief, he knows better than you. This isn't going to happen. He gets on his helicopter. He leaves. You're left sort of, insulted and embarrassed. 5 o'clock the next morning, all hell breaks loose.
All hell breaks loose.
For 54 hours.
Beginning of a 54-hour battle.
So I'm going to read this from your book. Typhoon was in its final stages. There was heavy rain. Cloud cover was up. The Navy was out to sea. The Air Force couldn't fly. We were overrun, and I had no support except for 120 people in my compound. So 5 o'clock in the morning, this starts happening. Continue the story. Tell us what happens from there.
Oh, well, I don't want to get hour by hour. I have to read the book for that.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
there was a couple of wonderful things that happened. We started getting reports of the different regional force and popular force units being attacked, then overrun. I mean, we were losing a lot of people rapidly throughout the district. And the district chief, who was that lieutenant colonel, he's called the district chief, never showed up. He never came to the operations center. And I'm sitting there wondering, I have no authority, but my butt's getting ready to get killed if we don't do something here. So I'm sitting there talking to my interpreter, Sergeant Long, and he doesn't want to go against the district chief. Captain Wynn doesn't want to go against the district chief, but we are being attacked. So around 8 o'clock, the northwestern part of the perimeter erupted in gunfire. So we ran over there and looked at it, and here came, I forgot how many people I said in the book, around 50 of them, 50 or 60 of them. And the guys engaged them and took care of them, and they turned and ran. Maybe it was a little earlier. But as it turned out, we later found out a battalion was supposed to have initiated that attack. But they were late getting there. Some of the guys knew they were supposed to attack at that time, and they did. That's why but we really knew then they were going to attack us. And Mo Duc District Eagle had never been attacked, and the whole time the Americans have been there.
So the first wave of this attack, you're able to fight back, but it's due in part to their slip up.
Absolutely.
I mean, they messed. You got a little bit lucky that they didn't carry it out properly.
Had that battalion been on time, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. No question about it. So back in the operations center, now we're getting the radios are wide open. People are yelling for help. They're reporting information. You can even hear some of them being killed while they're talking on the phone, a radio. Anyway, this went on for several hours, and finally I just started assigning people jobs to do. We need to know what's happening here. We need to know where in this village, who's going, where's this guy going? What are they seeing? What are their intentions? What's their strength level of the NVA? And so on. I just started handing things out like I would do in an American operations center. And I describe it in the book. The Captain Wynn basically just sort of sat down and gave up. Once I started doing all that, he sort of looked up at me and smiled and stood back up and started acting like the operations center chief again, And at some point around noon, I guess, I don't really know what time it was now, I realized that they were all looking to me for instruction and what to do. Well, I knew we didn't have a whole lot of ammo. They didn't even know where their ammo storage was, some of them. So we had to go around and scurry up our ammo. We didn't have a whole lot of ammunition. It was mostly for rifles. We had a lot of mortar. We had one mortar in the compound and two mortarmen. And they had a lot of mortars. But who are they going to shoot at? We had to have spotters out there, forward observers, so to speak.
And the district chief still hasn't shown up.
He hadn't shown up yet.
At this point.
I forgot what time he...
There's a saying, what is it? Leadership abhors a vacuum. So whenever there's a void in leadership, some leadership will step in, and it's going to be good leadership or it's going to be bad leadership. In this case, fortunately for everybody there, turns out it was really good leadership. But how much thought were you giving at that point of, well, should I step up and lead or should I not? Or was it instinctive? Was it, were they deferring their questions to you? And so you figured you must be the one. How did you arrive at, I got to do something?
Might be self-preservation. We're taught not to interfere with the other country and their organization. That they just hit a point where if somebody doesn't do something, we're all going to just sit here like a bunch of cows and be shot.
Yeah, I think you said in the book that you knew there might be consequences for you later on for overstepping, maybe.
Yeah.
But here's your choice.
Yeah. So I didn't use that term self-preservation in the book until just right now, but you asked the question in such a way that that's really what made me say, okay, I'm going to survive this thing if at all possible. And the only people I got are the South Vietnamese. So I guess there was a void, as you say, and I filled it, and they were willing to follow.
What was the fear level at this point? Now, and I know it might sound like a silly question. I'm sitting here thinking, well, duh, it was really high. But when the adrenaline's flowing and when you're in the situation where you've got to act, do you forget? Did you ever reach a point where you kind of forgot the fear at times, or was it just really heavy the whole time? the fear?
That's a hard question to answer. In the beginning, I was so scared I was shaking. Because nobody was doing anything to help us, and I wasn't sure what I could get away with or what I should do. After a while, once I sort of had the guys doing things, didn't know whether it would be successful or not, but we started reallocating ammunition and putting different people around and putting wounded back up on the berm. So, well, if you can talk and walk, get your butt back on there. You're not going to lay around here and nurse a arm wound or a leg wound or something like that. You can certainly pull the trigger and shoot the gun. And once they found out we had no medics, had no medical people at all inside the perimeter. So once they found out that they can bleed just as easily on the berm as they can sitting in the middle of the open area, there was no dispensary. It wasn't so. Things just sort of started falling in place, and the next thing I know, I lose my sergeant, and 122 millimeter came through the roof of what was supposed to have been a very strong, but it came in through on fuse delay, and wiped out half my team, and that was a shocker. Then I realized we were going to lose this battle. So I thought, well, at least I'll burn 7 years' worth of documents that should be available at higher headquarters, but we'll get rid of them here. Once we've overrun, the communists would see who had helped the Americans, and they would probably execute them. So I started burning those, and different incidences happened during that time with the sniper shooting at us, and every time I'd burn something, a bullet would whiz by. Had a machine gun over there shooting at us from time to time, and my guys would run over and take care of them and him, and it was just one of them. We later learned they were tying their people to a stake and making them fire into our compound, into our headquarters perimeter, until we killed them. Then they'd drag them off, replace them, and put another one there. Right, quite brutal. And we later learned at the end, after they ran out of their people, they were taking kids from the village, 14, 15-year-old kids.
And they were setting up, I was trying to picture this as I was reading it, they were setting up sort of behind the villagers or right in the village, knowing that you weren't going to fire at them and kill a whole bunch of innocent civilians. And so they were basically using them as human shields, it sounded like.
Yeah, when they did a mass attack, I mean, we had, it wasn't all constant attacks. It was
waves.
Waves, and they'd go back and rearm, try something else. There were an hour, 2 hours sometimes in between attacks and so forth.
Were you thinking it was over every time, and then it comes back?
Yeah, I knew I couldn't survive that. You were talking about what did you do? I really told myself I'm going to take as many of them with me as I can before they get me. And that was one of my motivations. My biggest motivation was I wanted to survive and go home to my wife and family. Yeah, I had a sweet little girl. There she is right there, back there waiting on me.
Wow.
And a son. And but I didn't think I'd ever see him. I was 34 years old at that time. I thought, well, this is my fate.
This is it.
This is it. But I thought of all the ways I could go, but I wanted to go out doing my duty and acting like an American warrior.
That's what a patriot soldier is all about. You just epitomize that.
That's what the training's about that we get.
Well, that's true.
We're not taught to give up after a while.
Yeah.
To me, I didn't want to be a POW.
Yeah. So boy, there's so many elements of this story of things that you were doing. You're getting shot at. You're going up to a tower. You're shooting back. I'd love you to get to the part of the story where you're starting to radio for help, because you got a ship out there that was giving you support from the sea, and you got a couple of airmen that came in and saved the day in some areas, but it was because of your outreach to them and your communication, giving them coordinates. So you're doing more than just telling people, go find ammunition. You're directly involved in commanding not only your people, but you're now giving directions to other units that are bringing in support to you. Talk about your activities during that time.
I think one of the most important things that happened, there was a refugee camp where the people had come in over the last couple of years since the spring offensive in March of 72. Now, this occurred in September of 72. The people in the outlying areas had come into the Mo Duc district headquarters to an area that became a refugee center, which was really shabby, stinky, terrible living. It had grown from, a couple thousand people to somewhere around 20,000, plus or minus. The district above us, Tunia, radioed that they had moved some artillery to our border, just inside or just outside of the Mo Duc border, don't know which. And we were at their maximum range, but they were available. So once my people found out, and we had learned by this time that there was a battalion or more in the refugee center. The refugees are refugees, they're not human people. They're people. They are the people who live there in the village or the hamlet around the district. They're somewhere else from the district, or maybe even another district. We don't know. Oh, I didn't know at the time. My people inside said, "We have artillery. Let's shoot the battalion inside." Well, the people in there were about as close together. That 20,000 plus or minus was about as close together as the three of us are. There's no way you would. A round might get 3 or 4 of the NVA, might get 8 or 9 civilians, men, women,
the refugees.
Children, the refugees.
Yeah.
I pondered that, and I thought, I can't do that. The way I was raised, the way we think as Americans, it's infallible. I just couldn't do it. So I said I wasn't going to do it, and I was not going to allow anybody to give the order to shoot into the refugee camp. So now I had the enemy fight me from outside, and the guys on the inside were very angry with me. So I had no friends. Well, my interpreter probably my only friend. He didn't have a choice.
Leadership is lonely, right? You're making a
good example of it, yeah.
You're making an ethical decision. They're trying to make a strategic decision that they think is the only path to winning or surviving. But you're making a values-based decision and having to stand by that.
And it was hard. It was difficult. What I didn't know was in earlier years, the civilians, forgot what you call it now. I never thought I'd ever forget it. Oh, the CORD, Civil Operations and Rural Development. They were civilians that Americans sent over and worked with the local people throughout Vietnam to help them with their finances, with their agriculture, with digging wells, with trying to move them up from truly being third world nation to at least being second world nation, if that's such a thing. They had put in $25 Motorola radios. Captain Wynn had one, and so did all these civilians in the district towns and the hamlet towns. Once the word got out that the Tultai, the major, me, I was not going to allow anybody to shoot in a refugee camp or any of the villages. They started reporting where the mortars were, the artillery was, the command headquarters, battalion command headquarters. I was getting all these coordinates. But I didn't have any capability to shoot them because they were not within the range of that Tunia, 2 howitzers up there, just outside the range, because they were west and Tunia was north, and they could just barely get to us. And there was such range dispersion that one round would go over our compound, one would fall short, one would go this way. It was range dispersion and was bad at maximum range. At any rate, they started sending all that. Then all of a sudden, these guys, somebody called. It was the Air Force. I think by now we're in around 10 o'clock at night, something like that. I've got the exact times in my book. And, they said they're Covey. This is Covey so-and-so. What the hell was a Covey? Well, he's a forward air controller. And he was armed with missiles and machine guns. And I forgot what he's armed with now. Can't think of what they are. It's no time for my memory to go out, but nonetheless, it's in the book. Two of them, Captain Joe Personette and Captain Rich Polling. And I gave them the coordinates. And they, the combination of, I see the mortars firing from where you said, and then they'd go in and try to strike them and take them out. So, they saved my life. And then they ran out around 2 o'clock in the morning. They ran out of ammunition and fuel. They said, we got to leave. I thought, well, I'm done for now. Next thing I know, the USS Hanson shows up, or we've been out there listening or something. And I think maybe the Air Force guys were actually adjusted some of their 8-inch 32 guns as well. When they left, I was an artilleryman. I've been trained to do that. I just took up the fire. I said, hey, here's a fire mission. And I gave them the coordinates, and I started adjusting them for the next couple hours. And the Air Force came back in. So then they took the role back over, adjusting their fires, and then we got TAC Air A-7s off of the Koreas and F-4s out of Thailand. And there was a real war going on there then.
All the support started coming just in the nick of time.
Just in the nick of time. When one would leave, somebody else would show up. It was just amazing the timelines of how things worked.
There's a couple of other areas in the book that really fascinated me. One of the things you said at one point when you didn't know how much headquarters was doing to prepare to help you. You just didn't know what support you were going to get. Or are they out there talking about it? Are they thinking about coming in and helping us? Like, what's going on? You said this in the book. You said sometimes the lack of knowing one way or the other is depressing. We say this all the time in organizational leadership. It's the unknown that is the scariest to people. So, for example, if you know that there's a big layoff coming in your company and you're on the list and you're getting laid off and they've offered you a meager severance package, but you're getting laid off due to downsizing. That's a terrible thing for someone to go through. But some of the studies and certainly some of the qualitative things that I've seen in my coaching world is that that's actually better for a lot of people than not knowing, am I going to get cut?
Yeah.
Knowing there's a layoff coming, but I don't know if my job's getting cut or not. It's the uncertainty.
The anticipation.
The anticipation of not knowing. You'd rather just know.
Yeah.
It sounded like in that moment, you'd rather at least know, nope, they haven't heard us. They're not coming.
I sort of had that opinion.
Yeah.
But I didn't know.
Yeah, but you didn't know. That's the scary part. The other thing you said, and this is where we can get, and we can talk a little bit about your faith, Colonel Collier. This was really, you said at one point, I could not have felt any more helpless than I did at that moment. And then you asked this question, what does one do when one sees no hope whatsoever? And
He prays.
They pray. That's what you do.
Yep.
You know what it made me think of? There's a scripture in 1 Thessalonians that is talking about death, but it says, we don't sorrow like other people sorrow who have no hope. And, for the tens of thousands of people, that experience something similar. I mean, they're over there, they're fighting, it's war, it's humans killing humans. And those that don't have a foundation of faith to stand on and have that to at least be your support and your backing, it's hard to imagine how to go through it with that, but you did have it.
I didn't know how much I had. I talked to people after it in my combat vet groups and different places. I've often said, I don't know how people survive, even in civilian life, if they don't have faith. How do you get through this world? How do you get through a car wreck? Or someone murders or even robs one of your family members, downtown Chicago, not Chicago, that happens all the time there. Somewhere, downtown somewhere.
Yeah.
USA. You got to have faith that you get through it. That there had to be a reason. That everything's going to be all right. Just hang in there. Suicide's never an answer.
Yeah, Tricia, that has to be one of the major things that have impacted your life. Being the daughter of someone who that's how you live it. When you have no hope, you pray. You settle yourself in your faith. You trust the will of God. These values, these ethical decisions of not shooting into the refugee camp, even though it might mean saving yourselves, having faith. How have these experiences and values that your father has lived shaped you and your leadership today?
I think I can sum it up in a couple things. My daughter, Samantha, actually has said, Mom, our family is different. We talk about things. We talk it through. We share information with one another as adults more. We share information more as adults to say, hey, I had this thing happen at work. Can you talk it through with me, Dad? Am I looking at the right angles? Or Mom at the time, because I watched several things. I watched a partnership between my dad and my mom and how family was important. My parents were involved in activities with my brother and I from, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, swimming, soccer, you name it, they were there. He made choices in his job, actually. He turned down a couple of assignments so that he could spend time with family because he wanted, especially after coming back from Vietnam, he wanted to be there for the family and make that connection with the family because there was a lot of mental abuse, or is that the right word, that they would use when he was in the war. They would use his family as a way, you're never going to see them again, things like that. So it almost motivated him in some aspects to want to come back and spend time. And so we communicate as a family. We talk through problems as a family. We share information. You have to work for it. You can't quit. My dad in this war has no quit. My mom had even more no quit in her from that aspect. But there's the other side of that. He was fighting it hand to hand. And then my mom was home hearing all of this going on, seeing people not coming back, having to figure out my husband may not come home. So I saw both sides from that aspect.
She's at war too at that point.
She is, absolutely.
That's what the thing people forget. And I always appreciate it when, people ask me, do you have a military background? I say, no, I have never been in the military.
Right.
But my father was. My father was in the Korean War and the Vietnam War and a major in 20 years and all of that. And people always remind me, oh, you were in the military.
Absolutely.
You sacrificed too. Your family sacrificed with all the time that you had without your dad being there and knowing that, and so, yeah, it's true. He's fighting it on one end, but on the other end, that feeling and that fear and that, and handling things, without dad being there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I did want to, you had asked a question early on in the conversation about him, when he stepped in, when he made the decision that I don't know that I'm going to get any support or help, or I don't know the right thing to do. From that point on, to stories that I hear and have heard over the years, he stepped in and made that decision to lead, and it was innate in him. But then even when he got out of the service, even in volunteering in the service, he stepped up as, swim coach chair for volunteers. There was so much that he did in a leadership role that he wouldn't consider leadership, but it was a leadership. And I saw that, and my brother saw that from those angles of, when there's not somebody else to step in, it's your job to step in. It's your job to bloom where you're planted, they would say, wherever we moved. And so there were a lot of aspects of that we would do, and get involved in a church and be committed to your service in the church.
Well, you say in the book, one of the things that someone, I forget who it was, taught you, when in charge, be in charge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who was that? Somebody, I think you said somebody told you that, and that. But that's right. When in charge, be in charge. Like, you can't just sit there and go, what do I do? Man, so many things here. I want to get to, so coming back to the battle, we don't have time to get into the rest of the battle, but essentially with the 100 or so people that you had at your disposal, some of them, I'm guessing, not very well trained.
No.
Yeah. And you're fighting 2,000 or more over this 54-hour period, 2,000 or more North Vietnamese people that are there to kill you and run you over, run you out. That's the outnumbered 20-1. And then when it's over and you're on a mission, I think you were taking some of the bodies, and you're I forget the name, the vehicle that you were in, but you're in a vehicle and some of the villagers stop you and they warn you of an ambush coming.
Yeah, we were in APCs.
Okay. And they warn you of this ambush. And so now, boy, the plans change. Like, do we go? If we do go, how do we handle this? And I'm gonna quote from the book here. You said, when you rolled through the ambush, you said, it was scary as hell and somewhat fun at the same time.
It was.
I read that and thought, fun? And it didn't sound tongue-in-cheek. You were saying it was somewhat fun at the same time. Describe that feeling of going through you're in war. I mean, most people can't even fathom being in this situation. And you're having fun? How did those two things mix?
After the battle, we started going out on real operations, chasing these guys all through the district and province. The Vietnamese, the first couple we went on, I could hardly walk. They didn't think I could be killed. And of course, the tallest one hit me right here. I was 6'1" at the time. And get away from me, I was skirting down so that the enemy wouldn't see me. But that feeling, at a certain point back in the battle, I'm beginning to think, somehow I've got something around me that I'm watching people die next to me, and I'm not. Maybe I can't be. Maybe I should enjoy this a little bit. I don't know the real answer to that.
Wow.
But I'm still a warrior. I was trained to be a warrior. Now's the time to enjoy it. If there's such a thing. That sounds stupid, but all of the training and putting together it all in one piece, and I was at the tail end of this thing. I had to get across that river with 3 APCs, wounded in one, dead in the other 2. Non-wounded in one and the wounded in the other 2. There were 3 of them. The interesting thing, a part of that was the NVA were to the west. We had just come from the east and south. We knew where everybody was except going straight ahead. And now they said there was an ambush. They were preparing an ambush for us. It didn't take very long for me to say, there's only one choice here. There's no talking about this. But my interpreter stayed back. So I had to try to get my point across to a sergeant who knew a little bit, and a couple of the Vietnamese, his soldiers, knew a little bit. We sat there and jawboned for about 10 minutes. But basically I said, we're going to go across 3. I'm going to be in the middle one. Sergeant is going to be in the sergeant was the highest ranking guy of the 3. He was in charge of the 3 APCs. That you're going across. If they hit your track and you can't move, I'm going to bump you. And it's about 30 or 40 feet down to the river from this little small bridge. And I said, and then if I get stranded out there, I told the guy behind, you bump me. Somebody's going to get across this river, or nobody's going to get across this river, or we're all going to get across.
When you say you bump me, you mean you bump me off, you get me off, knock me off the bridge.
Knock me off the bridge.
You sacrifice us.
Yeah.
You got to get across.
Somebody's going to get across.
Wow.
We're going to beat them guys if it's only one of us get on the other side.
We in leadership in the safe organizational world that we live in all the time, we have a leader will say something, and not necessarily because of language, although sometimes, but just because of style and communication style. Tricia may say something in a team, and I'm sitting there and I interpret it one way because I don't speak her leadership language.
Right.
Somebody else interprets it some other way. We make a mistake. This is war. You can't make that mistake. Like, there's so much at stake, and you're sitting here, new plan, new people, you're limited Vietnamese and they're limited English, and you've got to communicate this, and you can't afford to get it wrong.
There was a lot of arm and hand signals, like, kaput, for the track, and water, and, just all. I knew, wow. And after about 10 minutes of this, and they were all looking at me like this, and I was like, I'm not getting through. Finally, I said, let's go. they all started hugging each other. And I knew they understood.
Wow.
They understood.
They knew what they were rolling into.
Yep.
And
nobody refused to go. Nobody turned around. Nobody wanted to argue. Said, let's go. And the sergeant hopped up and yelled something in Vietnamese, and the engine started, and we hauled across that bridge.
Man, well,
and we made it.
and I know that there are so many other stories. You've been shot down. Your helicopter was shot down at least several times, didn't you?
No, just once.
Just the one. Well, that one's told in the book, and it is just unfathomable to think about being in that situation for someone who's never been in it. I really want to encourage people to read the book. I wanted you on this show to tell this story because, and in the very limited way that we can do it in an hour or so, I really want people to read the book. You learn so much about humanity, leadership, values, faith, fear, courage, honesty, trust, loyalty, betrayal. Here's something that is interesting, and I will go ahead and divulge this to everybody. Lieutenant Colonel Tan, the district chief who just wouldn't show up and dismissed all the reports and all that, you found out later, I think after your debriefs even. So First of all, your debriefs, you're careful not to throw him under the bus. You stated the facts. He wasn't there. He might have been derelict in his duty, but you didn't berate him and bash him and all of this. Later, you find out that it turns out he was actually subversive. He was working with the North Vietnamese. He was giving up Mo Duc on purpose.
No.
That blew my mind when I read that. You said, though, when you met him, you didn't use these words, but when you met him for the first time, you didn't get a vibe. You didn't get a good vibe from him. There was something. You had that. There was something about him at the moment. Something wasn't quite right. Did that inform and affect your decision making through that period and looking back on it?
No, I was unhappy because I couldn't develop a relationship with him.
Mm.
The battalion commander that came in after the battle, we clicked almost from the beginning. We were almost, hooked together.
Yeah.
I mean, as you read a little bit more, he would listen to what I say, and I would listen to what he said, and we were very successful. And we had a lot of fighting still to do, but it wasn't critical like the 54-hour battle was.
Mm.
And even we on the 4-party Joint Military Commission, that was really neat because we were supposed to take any. That's another story, but I supervised the exchange of the only South Koreans, not South Vietnamese, South Korean soldiers that were POWs. Supervised them coming back.
Wow.
During the 60 days following the end of the war. We weren't supposed to take any weapons, and I'd been at Chu La, so I didn't know what had happened in Mo Duc. They'd put me up on a 4-party Joint Military Commission on January 29th. This was probably around March 6th or 7th when we did that. But they flew me in and gave me a Jeep in Province headquarters, and I went down through Mo Duc, and I saw him. He and his battalion, a part of his battalion, was going to escort me down to the site where we were going to exchange VC and NVA for the South Koreans. No weapons were allowed. But I had lined my Jeep with stuff. I ain't going in there with no weapons. You're crazy. Yeah. And then I met him, and he looked at me and I said, "Where are your weapons?" He said, "They won't allow it." And then he had 3 or 4 deuce and a halves lined up with the POWs on. And he went in this one. We could have held him off for 3 hours with all the ammo.
With all the weapons you had that weren't allowed.
Yeah. He looked at me and I looked at him. In those days, you didn't do this kind of stuff, but that's what we did with our eyes. It was just like, we're okay.
I got you.
We're
read
okay.
You. Yeah, we're good.
It was wonderful. That's the kind of relationship I had with him. I wanted that with the guy I was sent there to be the advisor to.
Yeah.
But he was a Viet Minh against the French, as it turned out. And he had crossed the line, but acted like a South Vietnamese lieutenant colonel. But
Yeah. So all of those things, when you talk about the typhoon and the heavy rain and the cloud cover and the Navy's out to sea and the Air Force couldn't fly and you're overrun 20-1, in that paragraph, you could have added, and we had a district chief who was actually working for the other side on the inside. I mean, everything that could possibly be stacked against you are stacked against you at that moment. And yet here you are.
That's one reason it took so long to write it. Nobody would ever believe this. The battle was in a lot of newspapers in the United States, if you go back and look at September 1973. My in-laws had, every time they could find one in the Washington Times or the Oklahoma City Daily or St. Louis, whatever, they would get it. So, and I put one of them in there, said this Major Collier looked more like a school teacher than a fierce warrior or something like that. And I thought, okay, I agree with him. and I thought,
but watch me.
But I thought, so nobody's going to believe this. Then in 2012, after my story came out to my combat vet group, and I had been in my battalion from Vietnam, met in 2010 for the first time, and then my church wanted to start a combat vet support group. In 2011 or 2012, and everybody was telling their story. You know, guys were coming in that wanted to tell their story. You'd be surprised how many guys just want to get it off their chest, but they're only going to tell it to another combat vet. They're not going to tell it to anybody else. Mm. Combat veteran talking to combat veteran. Don't make a difference which war. The commonality is so strong there that I can talk to Afghanistan guys and they accept me. I can talk to the World War II and Korea guys and they accept me, and so forth. And I them. But lost my train of thought. Where'd it go?
Just talking about in the newspaper. The news articles about the war and how people wouldn't believe you.
Oh, yeah. So they finally made me tell my story. Well, I didn't want to tell it, but I had about 3 days after the Battle of Mo Duc, I was flown to Saigon to give a briefing to the commander of Vietnam, a 4-star General Fred Wyman at the time, 4 stars from the Air Force, 4 stars from the Navy, and all that. So they had taped it. And they gave me a copy of the tape. I never heard it. I didn't play it. When I got home, I just put all my stuff away and moved on with my life. So I said, well, I got a tape. I'll play it. When I finished playing it, they were dumbfounded at all the stuff that I talked about with those generals on a couple of days after the big battle. So one of the guys that I co-founded a combat support group with, started hunting around, and he found Joe Personette, the Air Force guy. He said, I had 2 Air Force guys shot down over my position, and 2 Army helicopter pilots shot down over my position. At one time, there was an 010 Bronco sitting there in sight of me when I was up in the tower, and 2 helicopters laying on the ground. I had 4 aviators, 2 from the Air Force and 2 from the Army, waiting to be saved, being shot at by the Vietnamese.
Coming to save you.
No, they were saving me. At this time,
right.
I was just sitting there and dumbfounded, watching all this aerial stuff take place, and we were losing that battle pretty strong. I mean, you know, my God, I had 99 of my 120 guys killed or wounded. There was only 21 of us standing when the thing was over, if you want to call it that.
I went through a list of decorations, well-deserved decorations. There's another one that I think anybody listening to this story would say you're worthy of. It requires, I think, maybe some greater rigor of documentation and eyewitnesses or something. I want you to tell this, but you've got people now saying the evidence is mounting and coming together again for that to be looked at. Is that, Tricia? This was you who told me this, so I may have it wrong.
I don't know what's going on. It was the guys, once they heard that tape, that put me in for the Medal of Honor, but the Army said there were no Americans left alive. I was the only American left alive. And so they had to be, they said the proof wasn't there or something. I don't really know. Didn't pay attention. I don't really care. I got out.
This is something his guys wanted him to do. And then when Dad finally decided to really get into writing the book, he started to get information and letters with the support of mainly Steve Vitale and a few others really pushing hard to find this information and help him get there. But now he has the records from some of these people, their accounts, their American first accounts of being part of that war. Even found out that the USS Hanson won an award for that battle that he didn't even know about. So there is mounting information for that in that process. And for him, it's never been about the battle. It's just he survived, and he was, because of his survival, was going to go on and lead a life of service. And he did that for, the family, for the state, for his church, for all of that. So I do think they're starting to mount evidence. I just don't know that he'll ever put in for it,
Yeah, well, I get that. And, that's I have found to be pretty typical of war heroes. You've said it, and the authenticity comes through loud and clear. You did your job. This was your job. You were there to serve. You served the best you could. You're grateful you survived it. You thank God for it. And you come back and you serve, and you make something, you make it count. Mm-hmm. That's great. A Congressional Medal of Honor, one, recognizes that, well-deserved for you, but to me, those kinds of honors are for other people too, because it sends a signal of what deep service really looks like and what it should look like. And it lets people know how big a deal, how significant that is. And when we're talking about, serving your country and serving humanity, really. So anyway, I would love to know that that's still on the table and a possibility. Just a couple of other things. Last thing about Mo Duc is, I think you said Colonel Bowman found a replacement for you, said you're done there. Oh, you wanted to go back. Yeah. You said no. That's my station. That's my assignment. Those are my people. Why? I mean, I would think, man, I could see you going, oh, thank goodness. I don't want to go back there. But you wanted to go back there. Why?
You just said it. Those were my people. There's a bond. Combat veterans, I talked about before, they may have been South Vietnamese, but they're still combat veterans. We still fought together. We fought for the same thing. We're human, regardless of what we look like. We have the same feelings. It's hard to say, but that was my organization. I fought hard just there, and somebody wasn't going to come in and screw it up. It was mine.
Wow.
Talk about ownership, huh, Patrick?
It is. It's pure ownership. During some of my leadership studies, Colonel, we studied servant leadership theory, and we studied steward leadership theory and, agency theory and all these. And I won't go deep into it, but you are reminding me of those studies, because people talk about servant leaders all the time. If you research servant leadership and where it came from, Robert Greenleaf and all this, there's actually, if you look at the body of study, there is a layer on top of servant leadership called steward leadership, inside of which servant leadership lives. And the difference is that when you're in pure servant leadership, it's all about just serving others. When you're a steward leader, you're also protecting something. You are overseeing a bigger thing, something that's bigger than you, and ensuring a greater entity's success while serving people. I listen to you, and that's what I see. I see steward leadership founded in a deep sense of service. It's just incredible. So you leave the military, you go on to serve. Surprise, surprise. And Tricia may you may jump in on this too a little bit. What's been basically the goal, the mission, the work since leaving the military?
Well, within the criminal justice system, with the South Carolina State,
Okay.
at the governor's office level, and then when they created the South Carolina Department of Public Safety, with them, then transferred over to the State Transport Police.
Okay. So in the fashion I expected, you answered that question with a little bit of some resume check boxes. And I remember, Tricia, he told me at lunch he doesn't toot his own horn. So I'm going to let you toot his horn for a second, because there's been some there's been some real contributions that he's made since leaving the military. You've told me about some of those. Share them with the listeners.
Absolutely. Well, his last tour of duty for the regular military was as the IG for the National Guard for South Carolina. So he developed a love of the state. And then when he retired, he got a job with the state in criminal justice. And then it turned into Department of Public Safety, where they started with $5 million in grants. And that turned into $24 million in grants by the time he left there. And he developed teams, and his work ethic was much like it was in the military. And that was surprising in some arenas, how hard you work. And he developed people. We have letters and cards from women and men who have said, I wouldn't be where I am today without you, sir, and I appreciate your service, before this book ever came out. And just wanted to thank him for him developing them, pushing them, doing that. And so after he did the Department of Public Safety, his last tour was as State Transport Police. And in each of the jobs, I think even in to State Transport Police, he had the ability, when you go back to that fun question, it's more challenge. It's not fun as in, this was a good time, because war's not a good time. It was more of, he thrives on the challenge, and we can make things happen. And so he got to go out and do some things probably he shouldn't have done with some of the state positions, and be a part of some things to see, all right, how do we need to make this better for the state? How can we change the way we're doing things at State Transport Police or in public safety, starting the DARE program, starting with some of the grants.
School resource
officers as well, community policing as well, were all things while he was at Department of Public Safety that he led and developed relationships with people, which is a key to what you do to be a leader. He's excellent at that, learning and knowing, and he has that great sense of, let's take the detail, but we still got to honor and love the people. So that's my version, Dad, of I worked here, here, and here.
Well, if I could find someone that was proud of you, that, share a little bit of, from a bias standpoint. No, I appreciate it. It's an important part of the story, because it's not just, hey, I was in this battle. There's just so much more to it. I mean, I read the book, and I laughed, I cried, I went back and reread passages. I kept going, this needs to be a movie. You just tell it and wrote it so incredibly well. Why did it take so long? You said you didn't want to tell the story. Why not?
When the World War II veterans came home and Korean War veterans came home, especially World War II, they were given parades. A lot of positive things occurred for them. Vietnam was different. We returned and given
to protests.
I don't know the right word to say it, but we were not held in high regard. Yet I think we probably acted in My Lai, things like that. They were isolated instances, terrible as they were. They were isolated instances. If you look at Vietnam today, they love Americans. I'll tell you some stories about that. That if we have war with China, they're on our side. They're a communist. I've gotten that on a pretty good word. But anyway, and then in the 60s and 70s, there were pockets of social unrest all through America. I got what I wanted out of that. I got to come home, and I got to take care of my family, and raise my kids, and do what I think I should have been doing all those years. I just put all my military awards and everything in a box and let them stay.
Yeah.
Then a guy in my battalion on the first tour, who was 19 years old, with a gun bunny, a cannoneer, we call them gun bunnies, on the howitzer, 105 millimeter howitzer, started in 2009. Where's everybody? I miss them. I wonder what happened to him. So he started rounding up and found his battery commander, found a couple of guys in his gun section, and they met in 2009 and decided to hold a reunion in 2010. They did it in Chattanooga. I was reading American Legion or VFW magazine. I don't usually look back at reunions, but for some reason that night I looked back at the reunions and read a reunion, Army this, Army that. 7th, 13th Artillery. Wait a minute, that's my battalion. Call Robert Adams. So the next day I called Robert Adams. He said, this guy on the other end of that phone said, hello, and I said, is this Robert Adams? He said, yes. I said, well, my name's Bill Collier. I know who you are. Well, I told him when I was growing up and somebody called like that to say they knew my daddy hung the phone up because he said it's a bill collector. But anyway, I said, I came real close to hanging up on you. But he had gone on to college. He went into construction, so I didn't want to do that. Went to college, got a degree, worked for the government for a couple of years, didn't want to do that. Ended up as a financial advisor, became very successful at that up in Kentucky. So he spent a lot of time and energy, money, researching records and trying to pull the guys together. And there were 20 or 21 of us that showed up with wives, and maybe 40 or 50, but of the guys that served together. What a feeling that was. Just to see those guys again 40, I think it's 47 years later. And then the next year, my church wanted to start a combat vet support group because we had a lot of veterans and a fairly large church. So I remembered how I felt that year in 2010, seeing the guys. So yeah, I'll go along with that. So I ended up with Steve and I and Bobby, three of us co-founding Project Josiah, restorationministry.org. And we've helped a lot of guys as a result. So then I get pressure as we go along. I started bragging about how many guys we helped. These guys really, I'm learning a lot from them. They're helping me because I'm hearing them talk. And then I started talking, we heard a little later. I put my story out there. And my wife and my daughter, granddaughter, and everybody started saying, where's your story? Write the book. You tell some interesting stories, but put it in writing. I do all that stuff. I'll forget that noise. But anyway, finally, after all the harassment, the fool out of me for so long, I finally gave up. And what was the key? I forgot what the key. I made a note at some point.
Well, yeah, well, because we were talking about this earlier about why did you not want to tell the story, and then now, why did you decide now is the time to tell the story?
Well, because of their harassment and because I saw how wonderful it was, and then I'm listening to the media today, and I'm listening to kids at my grandchildren and great-grandchildren's age. They don't even know where Vietnam is. They don't know what the word patriot means. They don't really understand what freedom is all about, that we enjoy. They don't understand World War II, Korea, Somalia, all these different places. They don't even know what they mean. Yeah. Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. They just live in a free country, but they haven't contributed to it. They don't know about it. They don't know how long it's going to last. They don't realize it could collapse on them. And so I started thinking about that. Maybe it's time for them to know what Americans have been through to keep this country free. And I ran across something that I read a long time ago, so I had to hunt for it, but I finally found it. Thomas Jefferson once said, "For a nation who is free and wants to remain free, we have to keep a strong militia and we have to maintain eternal vigilance." We don't seem to understand that in America anymore.
Mm.
We have people, leadership who build up a little bit, then the next leadership will tear it down, the next leadership will do something different with it. But the true value of our military, if we don't maintain a strong military, then we are going to be overrun one day. These people that went to World War II, Korea and all these, and Vietnam, and Iraq, and Afghanistan, what people don't understand is we're fighting these wars to keep them from occurring inside our borders.
Yeah.
So that was a motivation. I put all that together, and I just felt like I had to. So after telling them, I'll write a book for like 9 years, I just sat down in a matter of several months and wrote the book.
I think for Christmas, what Mom gave you on three separate occasions, gave him tape recorders and kept saying, "Just tape it.
Yeah.
Just tape your story for the family." And so she was the one pushing for years for him to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you've told it and are telling it. It hit me very, very hard. I think I was almost finished with the book, and I texted Tricia and I said, "I need your dad over here. I need him on the podcast. I need to tell people about this book, this story, this man." And she said, "Oh, we'll make it happen." And so gracious to just say, "Sure, I'll do that." Never met me. By the way, go to Amazon and get the book, but you can't have this one. This one was signed for me by Colonel Collier. You can't have this one. I'm so grateful. I'm going to put the link to the book on the webpage, and we could go on and on because there's a whole set of stories to tell beyond the battle. The Battle of Mo Duc is just an incredible. The way you told the story is just incredible. I felt like I was there, and but I know there's so much more to it after that, and I just appreciate it. I need people to get this book and read it. You've heard me recommend a lot of books. This is one. You got to get this. It's just about so many things, and I thank you, sir. And I thank you for your service and your leadership and your work since you left the military. And I really thank you for carving out time. Thank you for the book. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for having lunch with me today. What an honor. I'm enriched, and our listeners and viewers are enriched. Our lives are made better by it. So thank you.
You're very kind, very gracious. Well, I appreciate it. Appreciate your kind words.
Thank you, Patrick.
It's if people need to hear it, folks. Really, go right now. Click on the link on the podcast page. Go get the book. Read it. It won't take you long. Trust me. It's pretty got a lot of content in it, but it won't take you long. By the way, great photographs in this, and I really appreciate the fact when you get the book, you're gonna appreciate this. The things that you describe in the book, almost all of them, you found a picture for it. You get to see the overlay of the area that you were, the weapons that were used, the people in the story with you, and pictures of you when you were younger, and 34, did you say, when you were there? So I really appreciated the pictures too. So get the book. Folks, I hope you picked up a little something about leadership today. It's about serving others. It's about doing the right thing. It's about doing the right thing even when people might not agree. It's about faith. It's about ownership. It's about resilience, commitment, determination, not giving up. And it's about, these are my people. These are my people. I love that. That's what leadership's about. Lead on, folks.